Welcome to the Breathing Edge podcast.
Welcome.
Today is my episode. And today we're going to talk about calming the storms of menstruation.
I'm just going to co-pilot this one.
Oh, and he does co-pilot, and he's in direct experience with me on this as well. So here's the interesting thing. Menstruation does not have to be stressful. It doesn't. And the reason why I've gone into exploring this so deeply for myself is because in the past, I was like Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde, like literally, Shane's nodding his head. I would be like happy one minute and then crying the next and then angry another minute and then miserable and then great. And it was
probably
all over the
not
place.
that much different to any woman that is listening out there at the moment. It's you know, we're not saying that Angie was any better or worse, but we know that sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
Yeah.
You know, I think that everyone gets that. So.
And I feel really honored to be able to be married to this man because he was always so supportive of me in those situations. So say for instance, when I was feeling really upset and not doing really well and really stressed out, I had no reason to be stressed out, but I was highly stressed. And so Shane would just, he used to say this comment of I'll just put on the raincoat and wait for the storm to pass. So that was great because it gave me the space to work on myself.
Everything cycles, the sun always comes out after the rain, so it's...
Precisely. So when I dug deep into this, because Shane's like, surely you can do something about this. If it comes around every month, you can anticipate before it comes and do something about it. I'm like,
yes,
what a great idea.
It was an interesting discussion that we had when we were publishing our book, actually.
Yeah.
And you know, we were talking about menstrual cycles, and Angie and I said, well, it's a cycle, so you know it's coming. So surely there's some preparation that you can do to smooth the edges out. And little did we know at that time, not only was there something that you can do to smooth the edges out, and that it's a cycle, is that you as a woman, as a female, are actually in tune with bigger cycles that go on. So when you start to bring your internal menstrual cycle into tune with bigger cycles, we saw some magic happen, didn't we?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I basically went to work digging deep into research, going like, what was it like for the ancient cultures? How was menstruation? Surely it wasn't always as difficult, and surely there was some sort of something that I could do to help make this more of a great experience rather than a miserable experience. And what I found is that like ancient cultures used to believe that this was a very sacred time for a woman.
Not used to believe. It's noted down that it was, and still is. It just seems that today's cultures and, you know, for whatever reason, the whole lot of, let's call it, unworthiness going on the planet with people has wrapped a lot of shame and guilt around the menstrual cycle. And it's not that. There's an actual reason for it all.
Well, and it became a very difficult time, especially during the Dark Ages, where women were actually were thought of unclean, and they were ostracized from everyone else during that week. So they were kind of like shoved out. So no wonder we get grumpy during that time period, because our ancestors before us have kind of gone through that sort of experience, and where we are today is very different. And I love that in modern society we can do something about this for ourselves. So right now, like, I'm going to take you through some basic knowledge around this that will give you an experience of, rather than it being a miserable time, it can be a very powerful time and very magical if you use it right. So basically it's going to be, if you start having a look at getting in time with your cycles, you'll then get into your own flow. And the pun intended, because when you're in flow, everything starts working really well the way you need it to. So it all comes down to four basic things. Of course, a 28-day cycle, roughly around 4 weeks, 29.5 if you go by lunar cycles. Okay, menstruation actually is, if you break down the word, it means month, but in some cultures it means moon. So basically it's a monthly moon lunar cycle. Okay, so we have a look at how do we time our menstruation cycle with a moon cycle. Well, what did the ancient cultures used to do? Well, prior to the creation of the light bulb, every woman used to ovulate on a full moon and bleed on a new moon. And we were all in sync with each other.
Now, if the guys out there listening to this, just stay tuned to this, because this is going to be golden information when it comes for you to start to understand your partner, wife, sister, you
Children,
name it,
even.
any female that's around you. This is gold for you to understand this.
Yeah.
in this
And the
cycle.
mothers set the tone for the children. So if you're a mum and you have little girls, especially, listen up. Okay. So if you have a look at it, probably the easiest way that I can explain it is in seasons. So if we have a look at new moon time, roughly bleeding week, as well as what we call winter. So it's like a time where technically you're supposed to stop everything, which we know in this society can be quite difficult. But here's the interesting thing. When you do stop everything, you actually get really in tune with your intuition. It's like a time to turn inwards and start reassessing, reevaluating, planning, these sorts of things, kind of understanding, okay, what's going on that I need to know. And not only with your own body, but I use that time in business. I use this time to stop what I'm doing and put time and energy on, life, family, and business.
Kind of like working on the business rather than in the business.
Ooh, good distinction.
The winter and look, you may be thinking, well, I just can't stop everything. It's not about stopping everything, but it's
well, your body is forcing you to.
it's definitely about shifting gears. It's definitely about what can you do to minimize your output? What can you do to minimize the time that you need to be out there doing things? And as Angie mentioned before, start to bring it internal. Start to, to give you a really good example, this might be a time where instead of exercising, you might switch to meditating.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still something that you're doing for yourself, but it's more of an internal type activity.
Precisely. I read one article, I can't remember the name, but there was this woman she was a leader, and they were at war with somebody else, and it came upon her menstruation week. She actually stopped the war for a week to have her cycle, and then the war started back up again as soon as she completed. And I'm like, that is a really great example of sometimes you just have to stop the wars, stop everything, and reassess and reevaluate. And there's a lot of intuition and things that come out of that time period if you choose to do that. So then the next, of course, after that, you come into like spring and summer. So that's when your creativity starts coming out. That's when you can start creating new things, and well, of course, your uterus, yes, is ripe for fertilization. So are you. So that's where you start connecting with other people. There is a rise in life force energy within the body. So it's a really great opportunity to go out and network with people and implement the plan that you've just created and see what happens. And then you have a look at going into the autumn phase. Now, this is probably, believe it or not, probably one of the most important weeks that I see out of all 4 of these weeks, because autumn is a time of calibration. Autumn is a time of harvesting. So it's time to have a look at where you are right now in your personal rhythms and your personal cycles, whether it be business, with your partner in relationships, with whatever it is that you're working on, whatever projects you're working on. It's a time to calibrate, reassess, have a look at how you are going right now. Because what I found is, if I was in a place of I have to do it all by myself and I was overwhelmed and stressed, then I had a lot of period pain when winter came for me during that cycle. So I noticed that in autumn, if I was overwhelmed and stressed, it was an important time for me to stop and reevaluate and plan for preparing myself for winter.
For going inward.
Going inward.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that was one of the things that we identified together. Was that the week prior to the week of bleeding is probably the one where you need to be on your game the most about getting yourself prepared and getting yourself ready to really to go inward. So it's about wrapping things up, as Angie said, calibration's about wrapping things up, it's about tying things off, it's about being prepared. And this, while this, we're talking about it and it may take you some thinking to sit down and plan this out, it definitely is well worth it, because these rhythms are something that's very real. These rhythms are something that we see not only in menstruation cycles, but we see these rhythms in life and in nature everywhere. And so, the preparation that you need to have going into the next phase of the cycle always becomes key.
It does. And the real magic starts to come. And this is something that I'm continuously working on myself, is timing my life around my cycles. So that means I know if we're coming up to a new moon and we've got like a really big event on, I know I'm going to have to do a lot more work to create extra energy to bring my A game to an event. So, that would be something that, look, each woman that goes through her cycles is something that you have to assess for yourself. But when you start paying attention to your cycles and how your time with the moon, you'll start being able to notice how you can change things. And the big thing is around, I would actually say things started changing dramatically even when I started getting the blue blocking glasses in the nighttime and started blocking out the bright lights at nighttime.
Yeah, your circadian rhythm has a lot to do with the menstrual cycle. So if you do suffer from any kind of dysfunction around your menstrual cycle, the first place that you need to go to is a circadian rhythm. The easiest thing that you can do to fix your circadian rhythm is get up and see the morning sun.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, and it is literally one of the things that you can do that's most leveraged. And that is, and even if you don't feel like it, start to get up a little bit earlier, and you start to get up when the sun comes up. You start to go down and getting ready to go to sleep when the sun goes down. That's why it's important as the matriarch, or the main energy in the house, being the feminine energy, the female, the mama, they run the house, they run the ship as such, is that all cycles, personal in the house, should be built around her cycle, and her cycle is built around Mother Nature's cycle.
I love that. And don't think that men don't have a cycle either. And it's fascinating. Even when you can time your energy cycles with your partner, then you start getting in flow with each other. And it happens when, like I love how you said the matriarch energy. It happens when the woman of the house starts getting in touch with her energy. Everybody else sort of starts getting in touch with their own, and then we're all in flow together. That's where real magic starts to happen. So I would just encourage you to have a little play with it. Start if you're a man and you have a partner or these sorts of things, I would share this podcast with them. Just plant the seed, plant an idea on how you can smooth the rough waters of menstruation.
Not in the words, it's in the practice.